Hello everyone. We're back. Welcome to ConnectedLearning.tv. I am Jeff Brazil and I'm part of the team at ConnectedLearning.tv and the Digital Media and Learning Research Hub in Southern California. This is our 44th webinar in our series, and over the past several months, we've really enjoyed seeing a great and diverse community kind of come up around the webinars and the conversations that take place afterwards online. And we look forward to a new year. To those of you watching on live stream, we encourage you to use the chat stream to introduce yourselves, connect with each other, share resources, and post questions that we'll do our best to pull into our guests in the Google Plus Hangout. The URL for our public group notes, Google Doc, it should be in the live stream chat already. And we'd really appreciate your assistance in capturing highlights and sharing resources related to today's topic, which is under the large topic of mentoring. How does shared interest impact cross-generational relationships in formal and informal learning spaces? And before I let our guest speaker, Gene Rhodes, start us off and frame up today's conversation, I wanted to give everyone in here in the Hangout, Brother Mike and Jennifer, a chance to introduce themselves and kind of give a snapshot or two of what your connection is to the topic of mentoring. Brother Mike, if you can start us off.
Hi, how's everybody doing? My name's Brother Mike Hawkins. I'm lead mentor and coordinator over at UMedia Chicago at Chicago Public Library, and been doing mentorship work for about 7 years now, both in middle school environments and currently high school. One of the things that's really exciting right now that we're doing is working with Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation. So I get a chance to travel to different UMedia cities and connect with folks all around the country, bringing our mentorship model and exposing folks to the great work that we're doing at DML.
Thanks, Brother Mike. Jennifer?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Steele, and I am the project manager for the UMedia branches here in Chicago. And I, along with Mike, have been with DYN for a while. I've been with Digital Youth Network for going on 5 years. Similar background, started off mentoring, actually co-mentoring with Brother Mike after school in our middle school spaces, and eventually moved to the UMedia work with the high school students. And myself and Brother Mike as well, we both still currently co-coach the Louder Than a Bomb team, which is a citywide slam competition for high school students here in the city, and this is going on UMedia's 4th year competing in the competition. So that's one way I stay grounded to the kids and the work.
Thank you guys both for being here. We are joined today by Dr. Gene Rhodes, who is a pioneer in mentoring research. She's a professor of psychology at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and there she serves as director of the Center for Evidence-Based Mentoring. She has devoted her career to understanding the role of intergenerational relationships in the lives of disadvantaged youth. And Gene is also a principal investigator with the Connected Learning Research Network, who just released a synthesis report last week on connected learning that I and all of us here at the ConnectedLearning.tv would recommend you take a look at and share. The link to that report should be in the live stream chat. So Gene, if you could start us off maybe with sort of explaining how mentorship fits into the connected learning model, and as well as how mentorship is represented in the report that just came out.
Thank you, and hello to everybody. The reason that mentoring is so central to the connected learning model is because so much of learning occurs in context of relationships. And when kids are pursuing their interests and going deeper into a topic, having a more advanced thinker, having somebody like Brother Mike or others to help them scaffold that interest can be key to whether or not they go deeper into it or move away from it. I mean, what we're finding is it's really the people that develop expertise around their interests and go into almost a flow state around that interest that really derive a lot of benefits, most directly happiness. That's a key function of interest, is that they bring us happiness because we develop expertise, and mentors have an important role to play in that. In the report, we talk about how to structure settings to encourage intergenerational contact. We talk about some of the theory behind how mentoring works. We bring up the Russian psychologist, his name is Vygotsky, and we talk about what he talks about is this zone of proximal development, and that is that there's a zone between where a youth is right now in their expertise around an interest and where they could be, what they're capable of. And what a more advanced thinker or a mentor can do is pull them through that zone to a higher level and a higher level of competence and really enjoyment of whatever interests them.
Brother Mike and Jennifer, I wanted to give you guys a chance to weigh in really quickly on that. In terms of what you have seen in your experience with the importance of shared interests as being a key part of mentoring, how critical is that?
I'll start, I guess. It's very key. And going back to our experiences with co-coaching the SLAM team, both myself and Brother Mike are poets by nature. And we use that shared interest to really dig into the interests of our students. And they came to the table with a deep interest in poetry and slam poetry and had been immersed in this competition before. And so when they came to us, it was important for us to not only share our experiences, but to share our expertise to help them grow and develop and expose them to other things around their interests that they at that point had not yet otherwise been introduced to. And I think it's a reciprocal relationship, because as much as we've been able to share with them and teach them, they've done the same for us, which I think is also key to see that reciprocation happen. And I think that only deepens the relationship and the mentorship and drives that interest even further. And from that, we've seen our students blossom and grow in many different ways, some going off to college, some going to teach their own classes. So I think it's absolutely crucial. So I would completely agree with all of those statements.
Brother Mike?
Yeah, I agree. I think Jen hit on a lot of touch points there. I think a lot of kids that we come in contact with, they have a really broad interest. Like they may say they want to rap or make a movie or something like that, and really once they get into it, like Jennifer was alluding to, like they find out things that they didn't know. So maybe, like, for example, they might say, hey, I want to be like Jay-Z. I want to make a video like Jay-Z made a video. And really not understanding Jay-Z didn't make the video. It was a whole team of folks. There were writers, producers, wardrobe folks. So there may be touch points for them that they didn't realize that they were interested in. So going through that path, being able to say, hey, we got a video class, but here are some other ways that you can get into that interest. You might really find as a video producer that you're really into editing. You don't really like shooting. So being able to provide mentors that can push that interest along and open those doors to them. But also I think it's very important, what I've seen in our context, the idea of windows and mirrors is something that's very key. When you have this idea of somebody that looks like you, that has a similar interest, even background, you make that connection, which is super key and a driver. So, I think that really influences where we can take young people, because a lot of times, they may not see folks that look like them, in the field of their interest. So to be able to ping them to a mentor, whatever their interest is, who can push them to that next level, but also open the window. So it's not always just about, somebody that looks like you or has a certain interest, but like being able to open up the doors to other folks. Like, for example, like I'm not an amazing gamer, I'll just put it like that, but at UMedia I can ping them to our lead librarian, Taylor, who's an amazing gamer. So if I don't have the kind of the interest zone that kids are into, it's really in the UMedia ecology really important to be able to push kids to other mentors who have a similar interest, who can push them to that next level.
A network of mentors, yeah. And Jean, that's kind of related to that question that came in through the live stream chat, which is how important is it for youth to have mentors and role models who are like them in terms of gender, race, or other identity-related factors, and how much does this influence the mentor-mentee relationship? Sort of what trumps what, right?
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to talk about some research that we just completed. It was a meta-analysis where we looked at 73 independent evaluations of mentoring programs, some in after-school settings, some within school settings, and we looked at what factors really mattered the most in terms of affecting outcomes in youth. And the number one factor that moderated the effect of youth mentoring on kids was shared interest. It doubled the effect size of youth mentoring. So if you think about effect size as sort of the magnitude of impact, overall it's pretty modest, but when you have shared interest and you can build a connection around that, it gets into very, very strong ranges, really levels of like the best psychotherapy, if you can believe it. It's into a very strong effect size. So, and we have not found a consistent effect for gender, partly because in most mentoring programs where I've done a lot of my research, most of the matches are made on the basis of gender. You don't see a lot of sort of men mentoring young women and so forth. In after-school settings, we haven't studied it as much. And same thing with race. When youth can choose their own mentors, for example, in programs where kids are asked to recruit their own mentors, or in natural mentoring, kids tend to choose people of their same race and culture. But when they are given somebody through a volunteer program who's a different race and culture, it doesn't seem to make a big difference. What matters much more is shared interest. And I think some of the things that Mike was talking about, and Jen as well, really resonated in terms of I'm going to return to that notion of the pursuit of happiness, that a lot of the new research on happiness is pointing to the important role of being good at something that you're interested in, okay? That when you have that in your life and you love writing and you're good at it, and that's what brings us happiness, more than material goods, more than so many things. And middle class and upper middle class kids have adults who expose them to a whole range of piano lessons and all these other things. And in some ways, settings like UMedia and after-school settings that reach additional youth who might not have the same level of resources, have a way of democratizing happiness, bringing happiness to more kids. And so the role of adults in fostering that is so huge in terms of bringing the equal access to happiness.
Let me ask you a question that I read about something I read in preparation, actually, for your and I conversation, not this week, but a couple weeks back.
Okay.
It was from last year's National Mentoring Summit, and it was a quote that came out of that. It said that there was a study out of Minnesota which found that for every dollar invested into mentoring, society receives a 250% return. That was a number that came out of the Mentoring Summit. Yes. And then there was this quote, I think, from the chairman, which says, "I've been in investment banking my whole life, and often people ask you for investment predictions. I'm reticent to make them, but I can make one prediction with absolute certainty. The single best investment you will ever make is the investment in another human being, and mentoring is that investment."
Well, you touch on something that's a little bit sensitive. The summit, by the way, is coming up again this week. It's Wednesday through Friday in Washington, D.C. So it's a year anniversary since that comment was made. After the comment, I wrote and said, I need to find that paper. I've never seen such huge returns on investment. And he misquoted the finding. It was more like 25 cents. And so it kind of varies. Like, there's one study that showed the investment was really quite small, like 1 penny extra on $1. There's others that have it a little bit higher than that. So that was a misquote. But that, I think, is a really interesting thing, Jeff, because it touches on a problem in the field of youth mentoring, and that is hyperbole. Particularly in formal programs like Big Brothers Big Sisters and programs like that, there has been an exaggeration of effects, I don't think a deliberate exaggeration, but a kind of putting a lot of stock in things that aren't peer-reviewed, and then kind of not paying close attention to the findings that suggest that really mentoring only works under certain conditions, formal mentoring programs. It only works when there's strong, enduring, close relationships. And to get to that takes an investment. It's not a very inexpensive thing. It's basically creating intensive relationships, and that requires training and support and program infrastructure. And when mentoring is looked at as a very inexpensive alternative to those things, then you get into trouble. You get into false claims, and you get into thinking that you don't need to sustain relationships in all of their complexity.
Brother Mike, you told me once about a relationship you had, sort of in a long-term relationship. As a matter of fact, we did it for that other one of those video pieces we made. That talks about the point that Gene's making is you sort of have this long-term investment, and it can have this really great payoff, but it's not because there's still a lot required, right? Over time, it takes a lot of investment and a lot of time, a lot of sacrifice, maybe.
Yeah, I think definitely touch point on that. The relationship building is so key for us. I think for me, it's coming from a background before I came to Digital Youth Network and UMedia. A lot of the programs I did were I would come into a space, I would do my workshop, and I would leave, and that would be the end of the relationship. Kids might produce great work in that time period or not, but it was a really interesting piece for me making the transition to a space where the relationships could be developed over time. But also, I think what's key is the infrastructure that was kind of put around mentoring and DYN. The idea of that it's building relationships, but also having a key understanding of what cultural social capital is, building your pedagogical knowledge, so you can have summative and formative assessment for students. And I think some of those pieces really help develop the mentorship practice at DYN. And and I think one of the interesting things about the relationship building is it takes time, and that's the big investment. To watch a student, over a course of, I've been lucky enough to watch kids over the course of, sometimes 3-4 years, and once they age out of the program, they always come back. They always, stay in touch. They want to, let all the mentors know what's going on in their lives, and they often want to come back and be mentors, which I think is, when we talk about the investment payoff, like they see what mentorship means in their life and how it's changed it, and they want to continue that cycle. And that, as I always say, is about love. Gene mentioned happiness. I also ping in there the idea of love. Like, it's one thing to just have a job and come in and say, hey, let me just take you through this process. But we generally love these students and want to make sure that they have the best in their lives. A lot of times I hear all the mentors say, if I had something like this when I was a kid, or someone like this when I was a kid, I would be a better person. And I think we all kind of, work off that kind of DNA of our first mentor that really, influenced us. And we try to bring that into our practice. And another piece, real quick, we mentor each other. So, as we mentor the students, that's obviously a core, but, like Jen has been a great mentor to me. She keeps me on point. Also, folks like Mimi and Connie, they've all, Dr. Pinker, they've all been key mentors to me. So I can see what the model of mentorship looks like even in my own life, and again, continuing that practice with our young people. So it's almost, I would say, a mentorship lifestyle, if you will.
Jennifer, I think you had a point you wanted to jump in on.
Yeah, first I just want to reinforce what Brother Mike said about the love factor. That is key. I think every single mentor that I've worked with, and myself included, that came into the work came in because we wanted to work with youth. Like, that was our #1 priority, and we had such a strong love for not only our own craft, but then passing that craft on to our students. And, you know, and mentoring isn't as easy as I think some people think it is. It's a lot of giving of yourself and your time and your energy to care that much for not just one individual at a time, you know, more than one individual. And I think that is the essential, and that's why those relationships become so powerful, and why the shared interest is even becomes even deeper, because you do have that love, and when your students understand that you love them that much, that's what I think why the relationships grow and prosper the way they do, because you care about them as a person, not as, you know, like as Mike said, this isn't just a job where we come in, okay, we'll teach you, I know a little bit about poetry, let me teach you what a simile is, and we go home. But we generally want to pass on our own, you know, artistic traditions to the youth to carry it through. And just to sort of reedify that with examples, I always go back to our slam team, because I love them to death. And I think they've been a great example of what like real relationships, mentoring, shared interests, all of that can be. Is we have various students that graduated from our program and from the slam team go on to do a lot of great things. One of our students, Malcolm London, he was on our team in 2010, which won the Louder Than a Bomb competition for Chicago, as well as we then went on to Brave New Voices, which is the national competition. And that young man came through a lot. He was dealing a lot with family, just individual, his own personal struggles. And then to see him now where he's become such an advocate for that community. He's still working with Louder Than Bomb. He travels now. He's teaching. He just almost found his purpose through all of these transitions, through all of our mentoring. And I always say it takes a village to, you know, the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, and I absolutely believe that it does. It does take a village to raise a child. And we've had other students who have gone on to get full scholarship with the First Wave program, which is a performing arts program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where they pay for a full ride to school just to do creative arts and performance arts. One of our students won the MC Light Award for that program this past year as well. So I think once we show them that they can make this a career, and I think that's a lot of what a lot of students, not just our students, have learned, that when they meet these mentors and they see us as artists, because all of us are artists first, so we understand what it means to be an artist. How do you make a career out of this? What can you do? What are your opportunities? You know, then they go on to see that, okay, I can make this a legitimate career. It doesn't just have to be a hobby for me. I don't have to just go into English, math, or science, that I can actually do this. And we've seen that with a lot of other students, some of our video students, some of our music students who have gone on to say, you know, wow, I didn't think I could, or even go to school for this. And I think a report we got back, I think at the end of last year, said a lot of students who didn't see what they did at UMedia as a possible career choice now see it as a possible career choice, or actually seeking out college programs about how to continue doing what it is they love to do and seeing it as a viable career. And that's important for us, especially as we know the arts in schools is dwindling. Important to see that we can keep arts alive through that shared interest, and students who see themselves in you. You know, and I think going back to the idea of how important it is for them to see themselves in you is crucial, because they have to see that, okay, someone just like me has done this, and not just ourselves, but we can introduce them to professionals and, you know, our poets, like contemporary, you know, poets that are actually still doing the things that they love to do and being successful at it.
Gene, in a second, I want to go to some of your current projects, but I think Brother Mike had a story he wanted to share real quick on the effectiveness of mentoring for long-term academic and/or economic opportunities, right?
Yeah, so one of the stories I think is interesting, and this was a mentorship process that I watched at UMedia. It was a young man named Chance, and he's known in the world as Chance the Rapper. And what's interesting is when UMedia opened, him and his crew would come through, and they immediately got hooked into the studio. They were like, oh, this is great, a free studio. So they really, hone their craft there, and uh, you know, they would go to different mentors, and uh, whether it was our music mentor to get support in terms of mastering their projects, but also we do a weekly open mic at the library called Lyricist Loft, uh, and Chance would perform this one song every single week, and for a while there was a he would mess up the song right in the middle, same place every week. And he came to the desk one day, and one of our cyber navigators named Matt, he was like, they had a really, really tight relationship, and Chance would always ask, like, how was my performance? And sometimes we just, oh, it was cool. But then one day I heard Matt, and he said, you were terrible tonight. You were absolutely terrible. Like, I can't tell you any other way. And he was like, well, Brother Mike, what do you think? I was like, I think you need some work, dude. So, I don't know what that ignited in Chance, but I knew from that point, each week I saw him get better and better and better. And his drive was just, uncanny. Like, he was on, Twitter, Facebook, really learned the idea of creating a digital footprint. Uh, and then just the idea of having a quality product and, showcasing your work in the right way, but also, being able to ping him to opportunities outside of the space. So it's one thing to, showcase amongst your peers, but when you can ping young people to opportunities outside the space, we found that is really key. And he's become like, one of our success stories, going from, Lyricist Loft, this open mic, just for the teens, to performing in places like South by Southwest. He's been on tour with folks. So for him to see, and he always touches back, a lot of times when, Jen and I could attest, like, a lot of the artists out there, sometimes you don't ping back to your roots, but he always, I went to one of his shows and it was sold out. We're talking about like 1,000 people at this show. And, he finds me in the crowd and he was like, man, Brother Mike, thank you. I want to thank you and, you media for everything that you guys have done. And, it's just one of those pieces where, you don't think you had that much influence. You're like, wow. But when they can kind of ping back and say, it all started when I walked through those doors and got the love from, the circle of folks around me, whether they were in a workshop or, it was just having that relationship. Let me see your music, stuff like that. Give me some critique and feedback. That, those moments are just really touching to see, like, young people, become successful, and then recognize that mentorship is, a key factor to that. But also, last piece on that, what's interesting about that is other kids, see that trajectory. They know, whether it's Chance, doing his thing all over the country with music, or some of the young people who have, gone to college. Kids or young people are seeing that trajectory, and those young people become examples for the youth that are, starting the program. So it's interesting to see, like, how they, really, engage with the mentorship like that.
Those are great examples. Gene, I wanted to turn for a few moments to the current projects that you have, because you're looking at some really interesting dynamics and going deep, and also some of the aspirations you have for some of the projects. I'm thinking about the project for the Connected Learning Research Network, the Veterans History Project, which seems really exciting and cool, and then there's the matchmaking piece I think you're working on with a colleague of yours, right? Could you walk us through those and describe what those are, what you're looking at, and then what you really hope comes out of those projects?
All right. if it's all right, I would love to just reflect just for a moment on what Jen and Mike were saying about their experiences. And I think, and then I'll move to that. And I think that what they really bring home to me, and I think everybody who's listening, is how after-school settings are such a fertile ground for the formation of close relationships, maybe more so than informal mentoring programs, which tend to be, maybe once a week for 1 hour. After-school programs can be many hours, and in some ways, the staff in those settings are freed up from the curricular demands of teachers and really have more time than parents often to just have informal learning and discussions with youth as they're developing their interests. And I think that we really haven't explored as researchers enough all of the ways in which those after-school settings promote mentoring, and maybe bringing some of the evidence that we've got for what are the most effective practices from 2 decades of research into those settings. And that's something that I'm doing with the Hive Network and working with a whole team out in Chicago around that. Is one of the things we've learned is that mentoring that's done with some attention to the best of evidence, the best things around, because there's issues that come up in those relationships around ethics, around how to start, if the staff needs to leave the program, how to handle that termination. All of those things can be supported with effective, I think, training and support. And so one of the things we're working on with Hive is to try to make what we're calling, we used to call it intentional mentoring, because the fact is that staff in after-school settings are mentors, so let's be intentional about it. We're not calling it staff mentoring, and building and supporting that endeavor. The other just very quick things are, you guys both talked about how the staff are mirrors to the kids of what they could be, and also windows. And that there's actually a whole theory about that. It's called reflected self. And not only are they kind of, I can do it because I see somebody doing it, but staff see the youth through eyes that maybe nobody else has seen them, and they raise the bar for youth. Like they see in the youth talent and potential, and they cultivate that. And the youth begins to internalize how they're being seen, and that reflected self gets internalized into their identity. And so that's a really important thing that both of you talked about. The only other thing is the power of the anecdote. I think that's what's propelled mentoring, both in formal and informal contexts, but we have to also be aware of the downside sometimes of the anecdote, in that when we do rigorous evaluation studies, we don't always get, every positive story. We get a mix, and there's things that after-school settings could be doing even better. There's the problem of staff turnover, that a lot of the people who inhabit, maybe not at UMedia, because I can see you guys have been there for years, but across the country, a lot of people who inhabit and get hired into after-school settings don't stay for very long. And you talked about love. Well, then there's the hurt that comes when staff leave, and handling that well. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to what I'm doing. And you mentioned the Veterans History Project. This is something I'm doing out in Chicago with Travis Bickford, who's an Iraqi combat vet, as well as with the Library of Congress. And the idea is to get the oral histories of veterans and use the footage from that. We're working with Free Spirit Media to create projects and documentaries around that storytelling. And it's really taken off in Chicago and also in Boston as a way of, really as the embodiment of connected learning, because it's a shared interest, it's creating something, it's learning expertise in a scaffolded way around mentoring. And I will share afterwards, Jeff, the link to the new Veterans History Project Student Edition program, so people can learn more. The matchmaking project is something that I'm working on with actually someone who just won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work on matchmaking. And it came from the idea that we can double the effect size if we match youth and adults on shared interest. Well, what are the other things we should be matching them on? Maybe there's personality, maybe there's history, interpersonal history, all sorts of things. And so we are working with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and we are actually doing the first time in, I think, ever, a randomization of relationships. So for 1,000 matches, they're going to the volunteer mentors are going to be matched with youth randomly. And then we're going to look at those relationships a year later, see which ones had the strongest affinity, and determine what were the characteristics of the match, of the individuals, that led to stronger affinity, and then use that to build an algorithm that can help us understand the kinds of adults and the kinds of youth that are most likely to click or connect in a meaningful way.
This is for anybody, this question. How is the internet and the digital piece and the social media and the social networking fit into this? And maybe this is part of your matchmaking thing too, Gene, but does the internet and the digital and that whole piece of it make the possibility, does it bust open the universe of potential matches? Does it help connection? How does it fit into the mentorship piece? For anyone.
I think one example for us, that mentorship isn't linked just to a physical space, at least in the context of UMedia and some of the DYN work, that we do use a social network to the iRemix platform to connect with students, not only in the space, but as they're maybe at home on their own time, so kids can have that. When we talk about the 24/7, anytime, anywhere learning piece, kids are able to connect with their mentors, at their leisure. But also, as Jen and I have experienced, and I'm sure some of the UMedia mentors as well, that not just, iRemix, the social networking piece in iRemix, helps us facilitate a lot of, great relationships and feedback and critique. But also, what we've learned is that sometimes you have to track them down in their interest areas as well. So we've created, Facebook groups. We often use Twitter as well as a way to continue the connection to student interest. So it gives us a chance for the students to kind of see like what we're into, but it also gives us a learning window into what they're into as well. So they may, give us like, as simple as new music to kind of look at, and or news stories and things like that. There's a lot of like, for example, a lot of with some of the Born This Way Foundation work that we're doing, a lot of stories that have come out around bullying or violence in the community. Some of them that have gone under the radar for me, like kids in these Facebook or Twitterverse, have really they've really opened up the learning opportunity for me. But also, when that happens, I can bring that right back into the physical space, and we could either use that as foundation for learning experiences, further connection. But it's interesting that kids will or young people will search for the mentorship piece, not only in the physical space, but they also want to connect in these other more informal spaces as well, which brings up some of the some issues for folks like do you friend everybody on Facebook? Do you give everybody your Twitter account? And for us, it's been let's create groups versus I'm going to be everybody's friend. But it's a test to, I think, the type of connection that students begin to develop with their mentors. And I love what Gene said about the idea of having in some cases more informal time than their teachers or parents in some sense. And I think we serve a sweet spot in the middle where we're able to connect those in. So maybe some of the things that the connections they can't get with their teachers in terms of deep dives into their interest, we can fulfill that. And then some of the things they may not be able to express at home. They have a comfortable sweet spot in these informal spaces to be able to talk about, not only the learning experiences, but their life experiences as well. So I think we're in a really interesting place of, interest, but also uh, being these really important people in their lives that they can kind of turn to.
Jennifer, you had a
Yeah.
comment, right?
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think the social networking, both for us for iRemix for our workshop class purposes and such, but when you talk about the Facebook and the Twitter and this 24/7 mentoring, you almost become a 24/7 mentor whether you want to or not. I think just going back to the overall of the importance of relationships is our students sometimes feel like we belong to them, so they are able to access us whenever they want to, which is a good thing. But just to speak a little to about like the attrition factor or when mentors leave, I think it's the same when students leave, as Mike alluded to earlier, is we have a hard time getting rid of our students who have aged out, not to get rid of them, but students who have aged out of our program. They have a hard time disconnecting and moving on. But what these online or these social networking spaces allow us to do is stay connected with them too, and they with us. And even we've had mentors leave who those students still stay connected to those mentors as well. I have students that, and I know I don't befriend every student on Facebook. There is a select group, same thing on Twitter. But I think when you become accessible, it not only shows them that you are where they're at, because they yet still sometimes believe that you don't have a social life, an online social life, either. But that we are still connected to them in that way, and that it's not always that, even in an informal learning space, you can sometimes be a formal mentor. And I think by being on some of those social networks, they can see who you are as a person as well. Not that we don't show them that we are a person in those spaces, but I think it also shows them who you are outside of that space that they're physically used to seeing you in. So I know I have students that I talk to on Twitter, and I like to see what they're doing and what they're up to, and that's how they can still continue to reach me when they either are off at college or doing other things that they always know that they can find us somewhere.
And real quick, just touch in on that too. Like sometimes they forget that they friended you, and you can also see some stuff that might be inappropriate in their lives. So it also, comes back to, when we talk about the connected learning piece, like, if I'm talking about, you know, as a kid's thinking about maybe their academic career, if I see that they're posting all type of madness on Facebook or Twitter, it might be like you might want to think about that for your college career. So it also gives me a chance uh, to mentor them in that space too, how to use their online life effectively as well. So just wanted to throw that in there.
That's great. Gene, I think you had a comment here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there are some real benefits, and when what we're looking at, the algorithm is one example, but also connecting adults and youth through these digital media projects like the Veterans History Project. And kids can connect around their interest in creation of film, but they can also connect around their shared interest in history, around oral history, all those kinds of things. And so it doesn't have to be around one thing, but the media provides an opportunity to connect at all different levels. And also helping kids recruit their own mentors. So there's a great project. There's a number of branches of it, but it's called the sparkprogram.org. And it really is a project where kids are able to try to locate other adults who share their interests and form connections with them. I do have to also always mention, the downside of this, and the potential downside. There are potential ethical. Mike mentioned kids doing and saying things that are inappropriate, but we also, once a youth and mentor enter relationships outside any kind of supervision, there's always the downside, and so we have to be careful about that. And we also don't want to really mistake more perfunctory connections with the importance of really deep connections. And there are a lot of programs. The history of the field of mentoring has been trying to get as many kids with as many mentors as quickly as possible, in short. And one of the ways to do that is through kind of shortcuts, and we don't want to shortchange kids with perfunctory relationships.
Jean, I was going to ask you, for young people that are out there, and and may run across this or hear this, or they run across the idea of mentoring. I mean, when I was a teenager, the idea of having a mentor would not have been very appealing to me. So what's sort of the thing you would say about the power of it? And what I'm thinking on here is I've heard you say in the past, the research shows that the impact of like one really caring, influential person in an adolescent's life at the right time in a sweet spot just has this incredible effect, right? Can you speak to that?
I mean, that's really what got me into this field more than 20 years ago, and what has kept me even wanting to dig deeper and deeper every year. And that is that the research on kids who are vulnerable, perhaps because they live in hazardous environments or because of, low, very poverty, all sorts of things. Those kids, what we have found through years of research is that one good relationship can turn a life around. And maybe people on this call, on this webinar, know that. And even you, Jeff, you might not have called it a mentor, but a particular teacher, maybe in college or in high school, has really helped you shape that. And so my career has been devoted to trying to formulate and learn from the ones that happen naturally and try to import them into programs to create that same kind of magic that for years, forever has been occurring naturally.
Brother Mike or Jennifer, do you have anything to say on that topic? Just the impact of one person in a person's life, is something you've seen or observed?
Yeah, I mean, on one of the Connected Learning videos, I talked about, just this teacher that I, had as a high school, and it wasn't a deep relationship in terms of mentorship. It was really just he was an expert in poetry as my English teacher, and one day as I was writing, he just read maybe just a verse of my stuff, and at that point in my life, I was kind of like, am I a good writer, or is poetry cool? Like all my friends think it's pretty whack or whatever. But I remember in a class setting, he came over, he read that verse, and he just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This is really good work. You should try out for the school paper." And that one moment of validation, I always ping back to it. It took me to where I am today, and we didn't have like a deep relationship. Like I said, it was really just a touch point of validation, and sometimes that's all it takes. But then later in my life, when I did have a mentor that came along and said, "Hey, you're good, but I think you can be better," and he really exposed me. And that was probably about a month or two, where he was just every Wednesday I would go to his open mic spot, and he would share like readings with me, but also I would be able to see him perform on stage. So not only was he giving me materials I could take with me, but also he was, physically showing what he could do as an artist on stage. And I was able to, say, oh, okay, I could do that too. Or in some cases, I can't do that, but I want to aspire to that. And, those two touch points, again, really changed my life. And that's something I bring into, my own practice. Some kids, just because we run into hundreds of kids every day, they might just say, "Hey, listen to this one song I'm working on or a video." And I'll just say either that's a really great piece of work, or, here's some feedback. You might want to work on that. Here's some opportunities for you. But sometimes it's those, just touch points of validation that can really change a kid's life.
We're getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to give each of you guys sort of a final word and ending with Gene. But we had a question come in from the live stream I wanted to put out there as well. What are some tips that you have, just practical tips for mentors on how to make their intergenerational relationships more effective? Gene, what does the research show on that?
Well, the research shows there's two really main ways to getting that effectiveness: length and strength. The relationships should be enduring, and but enduring isn't enough. We have plenty of examples of ones that have gone on for years but really haven't been close. There also has to be this affinity, this closeness, and that tends to occur when there's, the shared interest, when there's trust, and when there's empathy. and really kind of the mentor being able to see themselves in that young person and care in that way. And I'll just end with some of the things that we're doing within the Connected Learning Network, and that is really encouraging youth to recruit mentors, and then going out and training those mentors in best practice. Rather than just always handing them one fish, which is mostly formal programs, train them to identify people who share their interests and go out and connect with them. And then training staff and thinking about staff as being intentional in what they're doing, that they're not just there to teach one thing, they're also mentors. And length and strength of that relationship is going to be what makes the difference.
Jennifer, Brother Mike, did you have a final thing you wanted to touch on here as we wrap up?
Sure. I would say honesty is key. I think being honest with yourself and why you're doing this work or why you're working with the students in the first place, but then also being honest with your students about who you are as a person. I think the more real you are with your students, the more likely they are to trust you and come to you and be open with you at the same time. And then just being open to receive whatever it is that they can teach you. I think when students see that they can also teach you something, I think that also strengthens those intergenerational relationships and meeting each other halfway. What music you like, what are they listening to, where you can connect in some of those ways as well.
Thank you. Brother Mike?
Yeah, again, I'll piggyback on points earlier, the happiness piece, being able to bring that to students, like being able to give them a path and opportunities to showcase their work to each other, but also to the larger community. I think that brings a sense of happiness to what they're doing. And then obviously the love piece, is such a key. The idea and belief that our young people can do it, because a lot of times young people go to some of these programs or schools and there may be question whether they can actually do the work, but having that belief in them, and if they see that, as Jennifer pointed out, with honesty and it's genuine, they're going to really buy in and take their work to the next level. And then last piece, being able to be, a teacher and a learner, I think is, a really key piece. And yeah.
I was reading recently where Kurt Vonnegut in his 70s, towards the latter part of his life, wrote a letter to a mentor that was a mentor of his, like when he was a teenager. And he said, "You were my mentor, although you were only 1 year my senior at Cornell University," so I guess it was in college. But he said to this guy, 60 years later, "The relationship remains prominent in my memory, and it should. You helped me, you wished me well." So I thought that was really, I thought that captured some cool points. So I want to thank you guys for being here today on this really important subject. And to keep the conversation going, we encourage you to continue using the Twitter hashtag Connected Learning, or by posting in our newly launched Google Plus community. If you go to Google Plus and in the communities, you'll find a new community there for Connected Learning, which has been growing really fast. By this afternoon, we'll have a full recording of this webinar, and all of the content that was mentioned during the webinar with links will be on the archived webinar page on connectedlearning.tv. And then for the next few weeks, connectedlearning.tv is running kind of a mini-series based on the Connected Learning report that was published last Tuesday. That's been talked about a bit on Twitter and in the news a little bit. And that third webinar, the one coming up next, will be Tuesday, January 29th, so a week from today, from 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific time. It'll be with Sonia Livingstone, who is also a member of the Connected Learning Research Network, a colleague of Jean's. And that topic will be exploring how social relationships shape youth learning both in school and out of school. So don't want to miss that. Brother Mike, Jennifer, and Jean, thank you guys for your time. I so appreciate it. It was a great conversation, a great topic. And everybody have a great day.